Great morning, friends. Great morning, world. It is a great morning. I say that all the time. It's my intro, but I mean it. Do you mean it? Can you see the greatness in this day? I love when people say that to me. They say great morning or good morning to me. Oh, we're having sound problems. Hold on. There we go. There we go. So always so interesting to do this. But what I was saying is that I'm just so fascinated with labels, and people always say good morning, and I know that they're just saying that because it's the appropriate thing to do. But I love to respond by saying I agree. I agree. So do you agree? So great morning, my friends. Welcome to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. So we're going to talk about system hacking today. And the main primary concept today is we're going to be making sense of thinking. It's one of the things that makes human beings so fascinating is that we have this capacity to think about our thoughts. We can actually think about thinking about our thoughts. And that's kind of what complicates us. So today we're going to make sense of Daniel Kahneman's amazing best-selling book. And we see a picture of it here called Thinking Fast and Slow. So let's get right into this, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction of what this is going to be about. This is a massive shifting book. This is some good shift. So today we're going to basically consume a 512-page book together. So I did the work for you, and we're going to do it in the next 10 to 20 minutes. So it's not just any book. We're going to be diving deep into one of the most influential books on human decision making. And I mean that. If you ask anybody that is well read, this is one of the most influential books out there. And we're talking about a Nobel Prize winning dude here. So Thinking Fast and Slow is the name of the book by Daniel Kahneman. Fascinating to me on a personal level, as his work provided me with much of the inspiration and tools that I needed and validation that helped me build my interface response system, which we're going to correlate, as I always do, specifically in the realm of validating the value of inserting a pause that will bypass and override our potentially flawed programmed perception and response. This is a really important power move of your day, is just to validate the reason that you might want to think a little bit more before you just hand the keys of trust over to this program that's calling all the shots. So have you ever made a quick decision that you later regretted or spent hours overanalyzing, something that you feel uncertain about? Yes, you have. Of course you have. You're not alone. According to author and Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman, the human brain operates with two systems, one that runs on instinct and gut reaction, and then the other one that takes its time, processes information, and uses tools like logic and reason. I like that one. But we need the other one. We need them both. Kahneman calls these systems system one and system two. And understanding how they work is the key to making better choices, avoiding manipulation, and ultimately mastering your decision-making process. I'm going to go ahead and say that would be one of the most important things that a human being could work to improve, and that is their decision-making process. And just as a disclaimer, you can't learn how to do that. You have to practice, and you have to fail a lot. So here's the thing. While system one, and that's that automatic response, while system one helps us navigate the world quickly, right? It's also lazy. System one is lazy, and it's biased and easily tricked. And what I mean by lazy is system one likes to, we're going to get more into the systems, but system one likes to keep things the way they are. Doesn't like to work hard. That's like that version of you that looks at what you need to do today to like level up, and you go, and you come up with an excuse. So system one jumps to conclusions based on patterns, emotions, and shortcuts. System two, on the other end, is slow, deliberate, and uses things, like I said, like logic, but it takes effort to engage in system two. And let's be real. Most people, as far as I'm concerned, in my observation, most people don't like putting effort into things. Isn't that an interesting thing about humans? I don't like putting effort into things, but I know that I have to. So that's why marketing and persuasion and all these tactics out there, and even our bad habits that, we're succumbing to, exploit that automatic nature of your system one. So there's so many highlights that I want to point, but what I'm saying is that another reason that you might want to look under the hood and do something about what we're about to share here today is that you're being taken advantage of because of that laziness. So you've actually created a business model for others based on your laziness. So we're going to break this all down, and we're going to do it in dragon style, make sense style, and kind of look at what Kahneman's research, which is extensive, what it means for you, and how these two systems influence every aspect of your life. And like I said, we're going to correlate and see how the interface response system, and that's my 4-step system that I created, can help you override the default system in your brain that no longer is serving your wants, needs, and desires. If you've ever struggled with impulsive decisions, I'm talking to everyone in the world. If you've ever struggled with impulsive decisions, procrastination, or just feel like your brain is working against you sometimes, this episode is going to make sense for you. So let's get into it. Quickly want to welcome and invite everybody to just consider what this is that we're doing. So I want to welcome everybody to the Make Sense with Dr. JC Dornick podcast. So this podcast covers topics that expand human consciousness and performance, if you're into that sort of thing. On the Make Sense podcast, we acknowledge that it's who you are that determines how well what you do works, and perception is subjective and kind of like Guinness, an acquired taste. When you change the way that you look at things, well, then the things that you look at will begin to change. And please, let's give a little bit of attention and some gratitude to the Make Sense podcast being sponsored in primarily funded by the Make Sense Academy. So that's our private community where we have open and curious seekers of growth and expansion that are applying the simple Make Sense principles and systems to move from simply going through life to move from going through life to growing through life. Check out the Make Sense Academy, risk-free for less than you will spend today on the shit that you don't even need. Welcome, my friends, to the uprising of the sleepwalking masses. Welcome to the Make Sense with Dr. JC Dornick podcast. And also welcome to our live broadcast. This is the opportunity that you have to see mistakes and just be with me and ask me questions that won't end up on the podcast. So I welcome everybody that's watching this either on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or on YouTube. There's a comment section there if you have a question or you just want to throw an amen out there or something like that, or check in and let me know where you're watching from so I have some sort of a reference. I see people here, but I don't know who you are until you say hi. So please say hi. And one of my favorite things to do is to just speak off the cuff. So feel free to throw a wrinkle at any time. So I heard Daniel Kahneman share a statement the other day, and it really, really struck a chord, and I want to share it with you before we get started. He said this, and I'll be posting this on my social media. He says, when you think about something, it seems more important than it really is. Isn't that true? When you actually take the time to think about something, you end up giving it more importance than it really is due in most cases. So this reminds me of the driving force behind my work. And this is really, really important to me. And that's the fact that our sense-making machines, remember when I say sense-making machine and I point at my brain, we have these 5 senses, potentially 6, that are basically analyzing, interfacing with reality, and giving us the information that ends up being what we use to make decisions and our responses. And it actually influences our perception of things. So if you don't know about that stuff, well, then the things that you think you're thinking about that are valid, and you might be actually like putting an exclamation point behind a statement, they might not actually be your thoughts. You might have been persuaded. Very good chance, in fact, that you've been persuaded. So our sense making machines, for many reasons, are limited. And that limitation is in our ability to determine what's actually going on versus what we think is going on. It's a power move to be able to just entertain that what you're saying about reality is what you think, not necessarily what it is. So I love that stuff. So I see some folks coming in. I'll say hi in the live format. Great. Oh, I love the way you spelled great. We're using the Creative Con language there with the 8. I love it. Very nice, Julie. Well done. Great morning to you, Monica. Great to be here. And then there's our friend Susan Cox. And a great morning to Lori and everybody else that's joining us here today. Have a wonderful day ahead of you, I hope. So let's get into it about the author. And this is Daniel Kahneman. Daniel Kahneman is actually the 2002 Nobel Prize winner, and that was in economics. And he's also a psychologist known for his groundbreaking work in behavioral economics. That's a fascinating, kind of aspect of human behavior, but also in business. Behavioral economics. If you know about behavioral economics, what you're basically looking at is the behavioral component of human beings responding to money stuff, right? And trends and things like that. So behavioral economics, decision making, and cognitive biases, which I love. Much of his research conducted alongside his collaborator, Amos Tversky. So there's the live version. You get the phlegmy throat. So we'll say that again. Much of his research conducted alongside his collaborator, Amos Tversky, has reshaped our understanding of human rationality or lack thereof. Kahneman's studies have exposed the hidden flaws in how we think, and that's revealing the predictable ways that our brains deceive us when making judgments and decisions. Interesting to consider how your brain can deceive you. Right. If you're getting caught up in your thoughts, and I'll just transparently say it still happens to me, even though I know this stuff. I was having some thoughts and fears and anxieties about things. And I was sitting there in that moment, understanding that it wasn't really something I could control. And it wasn't even reality. I was just caught up in those thoughts. So, I just could see my brain trying to deceive me into thinking something. And it triggered feelings, and I went through the experience of it, even when I knew that it wasn't real. So if you're not even consciously checking that and knowing that it's not real, well, it's very easy for your brain to deceive you and persuade you into thinking something's real. And we know that the human brain doesn't really have the ability to decipher the difference between something that's actually happening and what it thinks it is happening. So what you think is happening is very important, and that's what this work is about. So his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, is a culmination of decades of research bringing to light the mechanisms behind human thought and why we often make irrational choices. I know you don't make irrational choices, but everybody else, makes irrational choices, especially when we think that we're being rational. Isn't that funny? That we make irrational choices, and the worst kind of irrational choice is the one where you think you're being rational. So here's the essence. In my book reviews on Mondays, I just want to arm and equip you. It's not a replacement for reading the book. This is one of the best books that I've ever read. Most impactful books for sure. I like to give you the takeaways so that I can arm and equip you to have a better day today and a better week if you actually put these things into play. But please, always, and I always put the links to the books and I provide a book trail of all my books. Check this book out. This is definitely something you should really dive deep into. So here's the essence of thinking fast and slow. And let's go over those two systems. So at its core, thinking fast and slow breaks human cognition down into two modes of thought. So that means that in the realm of our thinking, there's two different modes. And first, there's system one. So here are the characteristics of system one. So think about how this interprets in your life. System one is fast, automatic, instinctive, and emotional. This is the system that makes This is the system that makes snap judgments and quick decisions based on heuristics, gut feelings, and ingrained biases. Sometimes we actually use system one thinking it's the more rational thing to do, but that's because we're unconscious of what's going on. Checking with your gut, right? It's reactive and efficient, but prone to errors. That's the key. It's reactive and efficient. Get out of the way. Here comes a speeding train, but also very prone to errors, validating the reason why you should look at this stuff, and also prone to illusions and impulsive decision making. So that's system one, your knee-jerk reflex. That's your programmed knee-jerk reflex that most people spend 95% of their day allowing to just run the show. And the only thing you can do about that, because you'll never change the fact that your brain runs 95% on that, and you have these little 5% of your day moments of clarity. So during those 5% moments of clarity, maybe you're having that right now because I'm talking about it. What you want to do is gain access to checking under the hood, disputing everything else. That's one thing that you always can do, is you can delay your response. You can feel it, just like I said before, but you can delay it. So system one is running most of the time, and we're thankful for it, but it's prone to errors. System two, here are the characteristics. It's slow, deliberate, analytical, and logical. Ooh, I like that. That sounds good. America, check out system two. This system steps in when we're let me get this again. This system steps in when we're effortful, or using what we call effortful thinking, and when that's required. So system two steps in when effortful thinking is required, meaning we got to take a moment to check things out. And also in tune with solving complex problems and questioning assumptions and engaging in what's called deep learning. Kahneman speaks a lot about deep learning. Think about what that would mean for you to practice deep learning. It's not just learning, right? It's actually putting forth an effort to really grasp. Like, as you're listening to me talk right now, are you doing something else as well? And I'd love that feedback as well. Great morning to you, Kathy. That's not deep learning. Deep learning, which is hard because it requires effort, is when you really put your focus and attention. This is why when you go and you pay money and you go hear somebody speak, or even if you're with me right now, it would be advantageous to like stop scrolling and stop checking your phone and things like that, and become present. System two requires mental energy and focus, which is why we often default to system one unless forced, right? Unless otherwise forced. So think about what that means. All of those moments where you kind of know what you need to do to proceed. And we just had this amazing interview with Gay Hendricks on upper limit problems, and that plays into it. But all those moments where you know the hard work, right? Pushing through failure or letdowns or setbacks, whenever you see that hard work, or even something that you have to think through because you don't fully understand it, because you get confronted with the effort and hard work, you'll always default back to what you call your comfort zone, and that's system one. So now you have this new language, system one and system two. So like I said before, all you really have the ability to do is dispute, contemplate, and have a look at system one, check it against facts and things like that. And if you do that long enough, then habit transformation takes place and you can actually remodel your system one. Imagine if you had an automatic program running that you didn't even have to think about, right? It was like the greatest employee or assistant you ever had that you know has your back and it's going to take care of everything because you've programmed it or trained it that way. So that's what you can do with system one. But right now, until you start doing some of that effortful hard work, system one is just calling the shots and you don't even know if it's a good idea yet. I say check it. So the challenge, as human beings, we are faced with the challenge of making decisions all the time without being fully informed and therefore forced to rely on our sense-making machines and our five senses and our experiences, our mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, and evolution programmed brains, relying on them and that operating system and things like intuition, right, to call the shots. So Kahneman's research exposes a fundamental truth. While system one, automatic reflexive, while system one is incredibly efficient and necessary for our survival, thank you, system one. Thank you so much. It often leads to cognitive biases, right? Which is where we do something that we know is not right, but we protect it. We say we hang around with only people that say the same thing, and we disconnect with anything or protect ourselves from anything else. It's also involved in poor decision making and a failure to question what he calls faulty logic. Pause on that for a second and just ask yourself, what does that mean? Faulty logic. You know what that means? There's a place in your brain where you think that you're using logic and rationale, but it's just cloaked, right? It's cloaked to look like logic and rationale, but it's actually your program that has been, programmed from the outside forces that I mentioned and showing up as logic and rationale. So that's what he calls faulty logic. Meanwhile, system two, remember, we're talking about the challenge now, which is capable of deeper rational thinking, is also lazy, energy intensive. Our brains don't like to do things that require energy, which is why we have to time block and things like that. Have you ever gotten just brain fatigue? Shout out to my brother, Jim Quick. He teaches you how to strengthen that muscle we call the brain. So it's energy intensive and not naturally engaged. It's not on autopilot. We have to consciously engage it unless we deliberately activate it. So this is the problem going on in your brain. And I can just tell you, I'm going to weaponize you today with awareness. That's the most important part of everything I'm sharing today, is just to first become aware. And from that place, you can start doing things. And it might be just little things. So let's make sense of the two systems in correlation with the interface response system. And that is my work. So Kahneman's work actually validates something that I've been teaching for years now, probably about 8 or 9 years. And that is the power of conscious intervention in our thinking. Consciously deciding to intervene with our thinking process. He reminds us that all decisions are made with only partial information. This is a very, very important thing for humans to acknowledge. Our decision-making process is being done with partial information. In other words, the very nature of our decision-making process requires a system of making our best possible guess based on what we have, that partial information. So Kahneman says that the solution is to make all attempts to improve your decision-making process at the margin. Now, what does that mean? Right? Well, I can tell you what I think it means, but he says that our best fight against this faulty system, and if your goal and desire is to make better decisions and enjoy life more and lame things like that, he says the fight has to be, placed at the margin. And that's, what Viktor Frankl would call the space between. And I talk about that in the interface response system, meaning when you interface with something and you know that you have this programmed response, this system one response, which is very, very faulty at times, and it could be out of date, that's the margin. In that space, we teach people to go, right? Allow yourself to recoil, cognitively distance yourself. And that's in the margin. That's where he calls the margin. So Viktor Frankl calls the space between, Kahneman calls it the margin, the space between the stimulus and our response. Never looking to reach perfection. This is important. Because another thing that you'll do to revert back to system one is as soon as you say, God, what's the use? It's because you think that you're supposed to get this right. Now, the goal is to become aware of it, weaponized with awareness, and then seek improvement. Never looking to seek perfection, but rather improvement. This is exactly when I found this out in my own ways before I read this book. When I found this out, that's why I began working and creating what we call the interface response system. And my goal and my desire, and I figured it out, is to create a practical tool to basically, in these terms, override system one's automatic, often misleading responses and giving ourselves access, allowing space, even just creating better odds to access the deeper, more intentional thought process of system two. So let's break this down. Now, I heard Daniel Kahneman say this in a lecture one time, and he was basically just talking about what's really, really important here. And that is that you allow yourself, and this is tough in this crazy world that we're in, allow yourself to just delay. You don't have to give up on your system one response. You can always revert back to it. And unfortunately, you typically will, but allow yourself to delay it. Delay it. Why not? Why do we have to be in such a rush? And if you feel like you're in a rush to make decisions, there's a good chance that it's your program running or somebody's made you feel that way. So let's break it down. Most people operate on autopilot. Most people, 95%. And that's driven by system one. And they do that without even realizing it. But you guys are talking with me right now, so you realize it. So the brain is constantly bombarded with stimuli. And to save energy, right? Our brains are always looking to save energy. It categorizes shortcuts and makes up rapid fire judgments based on past experiences, assumptions, and external conditioning. What that's saying is that not only is your brain using the past to formulate a perception and a response to things, but it's doing so because it thinks it's an efficient way. Rather than like processing everything, it just runs it kind of like ChatGPT or something, or Google. It just runs it through its past experiences and everything that's been programmed into our brain, so it doesn't have to do the work. It doesn't want to do any research on this. And the problem with that is that your past experiences are no longer relevant because they're in the past, right? All that matters is what we're talking about right now. It's kind of like a vaccination that is out of date. I didn't give my opinion right there about vaccinations, but it's just an observation. If I'm going to get vaccinated for something that's going on right now, I would want something that's relevant and protective right now, not something from the past. Did I just subliminally give my opinion there? I don't think so. So this works fine when you're deciding what sandwich to order, but when it comes to high stakes situations and decisions and business decisions, relationships, personal growth, this autopilot, the system one autopilot, can lead to flawed thinking, misinterpretations, and self-sabotaging behaviors. So here's a cool thing about that. When you like 45 times today exhibit those things, self-sabotage, flawed thinking, misinterpretations, or like I did last night when my brain was trying to deceive me into thinking that there was a problem that I had no control over, a problem I couldn't do anything about, and one that didn't really even exist. So I had the ability to question it. I said, interesting. And I understood that that was system one trying to do something to me. And I just made a conscious choice, used a little bit of meditation and some deep breathing to say, no, thanks. Thanks, but no thanks. So this is where the interface response system comes in and why I created it. It's actually what we call a hacking tool. The interface response system, it's a 4-step response, a system of processing things, acknowledging things, and making better decisions. It's a hacking tool. And what are we hacking? System one. So phase one of the interface response system we call perceive. And that's when we recognize when system one is running the show, which is pretty much all the time. So we're just become aware of it. There's that weapon. This means catching yourself in reactive thinking, noticing patterns of bias. This is exactly what happened to me last night when I was laying in bed. Chicken doesn't know this, but I was all worried about something that wasn't even real. And identifying when your brain is jumping to conclusions without deeper reflection. So phase two. So phase one is just becoming aware of that, catching yourself. We call it drifting and shifting. Catch your drift, and then you create the foundation to create a shift. So phase two is what we call pause. There's the System one thrives on speed, right? That urgency to make a decision irrationally. But the interface response system is there, especially step two, the pause, to disrupt this autopilot and conscious pause. So this is the space between the stimulus and response we were talking about, where we reclaim control before reacting. So there's that delay. We allow ourselves to say, okay, noted. I feel it. I understand it, but I'm going to allow myself to delay my response and give myself some space to use system two to evaluate things. Remember, is spelled HMMM, which stands for haven't made up my mind yet. I heard you, but I haven't made up my mind. I just love that. So then we move to system three. We're in the space. We've got some time, right? We took our knee-jerk reflex and we just said, hey, grab a coffee. We haven't fired you, but just grab a coffee. We're going to do a couple. The big boys are going to think here for a second. So phase three is called process. And that's where the real magic happens. That's where you allow yourself to look at things from multiple vantage points. So the real magic happens here by consciously stepping into the space of deliberate thought. We engage and create space for system two. Ooh, this gives me the chills. She says, I just love it. Yeah, I just love it as well. I just love the idea that we actually do control the shots. So the real magic happens here by consciously stepping into the space of deliberate thought. We engage system two. We examine different perspectives, challenge our initial reactions, and ask questions that require deeper thinking. You cannot try and practice deeper thinking if you don't allow yourself to have some space, right? And remember, the validation of giving yourself that space, because it requires work and effort, is your desire to have a better outcome, a better experience in life, right? To release yourself from struggle all the time and manifest everything that you've ever desired, and acknowledge that your system one has not been working. If you are not where you want to be and you feel stuck, acknowledge in this moment that your system one has not helped you. It's helped you get out of the way of the speeding train, but not as far as your success. That validates you going, it's not a lot of effort. Try it. Say, did you do that right now? So we examine different perspectives in that space, challenge our initial reactions, and ask questions that require deeper thinking. Is this belief that I'm having even true? What's another way that I could look at this? Is there another way? If you're talking to somebody and you think they're crazy, ask yourself, what does it look like from their standpoint? Why are they acting this way? Not just the reflex and the conditioning. Kehneman highlights the necessity of engaging system two for better decision making. But the reality is that most people don't do it because it's uncomfortable and effortful. Lazy. System one preys on your laziness. Like system one is like McDonald's. As soon as you make any sort of an effort, system one goes, hey, that was a good effort. You deserve a break today. Come on back. Have a Big Mac. So the interface response system is there as that hacking tool, and it's designed to create a structured process that makes engaging system two easier. It's actually fun. You could gamify this. That's why we like to do turning it into a habit eventually instead of a rare occurrence. So the more you practice this, pausing, and allowing yourself to contemplate and process things and gain access to system two. You do this with repetition, just like any habit. You start to form a habit of becoming somebody that does that. That's when you start to notice your system one, your autopilot, starts to get an upgrade. That's what you really want to do. And that's what's the value of creating habits, is to upgrade your system one. So let's just talk about deep learning in the interface response system, because there's this thing called rewiring neuroplasticity. We can rewire the way we think. So Kahneman touches on the idea of deep learning, where he talks about the fact that repeated exposure to deliberate thinking can rewire our cognitive habits. The interface response system aligns with this concept by systematically shifting our approach to decision making over time. Over time, folks. This is not going to happen in a day. In fact, it's never actually going to, be finished. That's a quality decision. It's going to be tough, but it's so worth it. The juice is worth the squeeze. So the more we use it, the more natural it becomes. And that idea of slowing things down, challenging our thoughts, and reprogramming the way we look at the world, it becomes something that is no longer looked at as tough. I have so much fun. A lot of people in my family say things though, like, hey, don't me, right? But it's so much fun. Very, very fun to gamify it. So in other words, the interface response system is a mental training ground for system two. That's what I'm telling you to do today, or encouraging you to do, is go train in system two. Just train, like building a muscle. Go allow yourself to access system two, and then reassess and see if you're getting better results. If you like it, continue. If not, you probably thought you were in system two, but you were staying in system one. And that allows you to become better thinkers, make wiser choices, and avoid the mental traps that system one so often falls into. So there's an evolutionary mismatch that I found that I think is really, really cool. And this is why system one fails in our current modern society. And we're almost done. System one is an evolutionary masterpiece. That's why we're still here. That's why we're still alive. It's helped our ancestors survive by making split-second decisions in high-stakes environments, detecting danger, seeking food, and navigating social hierarchies. But, bringing my butt into this. But in today's world, the same system is often outdated and misapplied or malapplied. What's the right word there? For example, our primal cravings for calorie-dense foods make sense when food was scarce. So this thing that we have where we like calorie-dense food, it made perfect sense. It was a great idea when food was scarce, so that because we wouldn't eat as much and we needed it. But in this modern era of abundance, system one drives impulsive overeating and health issues. So even though we have all the food that we need in refrigerators and things like that, we still overeat instinctively because of system one. So you got to reprogram this thing. Similarly, our instinctive fear of rejection once helped us stay accepted in our tribes. Fear of rejection used to be a great thing. It helped you stay in your tribe. But today, it fuels people pleasing, social anxiety, and avoidance behaviors that sabotage personal growth, right? A lot of our problems come from this system one. So that's why we should it. I feel that the interface response system is what we call a system upgrade. That's what if you practice it. And by the way, all this stuff is being taught in the Make Sense Academy. So just say make sense, and we'll offer you a invitation to come try it risk-free. But we talk about this all the time. This is our language, and that's us practicing this consciousness, this conscious, thinking process about acknowledging everything that's going on and making better quality decisions. And that's how we're all upgrading. So I'm seeing everybody in the Make Sense Academy upgrading all the time. And it's just because they're giving themselves a little bit more opportunity to think. So it's a system upgrade, bridging the gap between our primal instincts and our higher intelligence by allowing us to consciously override system one's outdated programming. I feel that anything that helps us tap into our system two, a way of thinking, can be viewed as an upgrade. So if you have another way, meditation, breath work, whatever, going for a walk, or whatever it is that you do, if it taps you into system two, it's an upgrade. So what thinking fast and slow means for us today, Kahneman's work isn't just about understanding the brain. It's about using this knowledge to change how we operate in life. So what's my biggest takeaway? Left unchecked, right? It will default. Our brain is not our friend, guys. This is my biggest takeaway. We think and we trust our brain, but remember, your brain's not your friend. Your brain's wired for something else than to be friendly with you. Left unchecked, it will default to shortcuts, biases, and flawed reasoning. Always. If we want to improve our decision making, relationships, and life's trajectory, we must train ourselves to engage in system two more often. This is exactly why the IRS was created, the interface response system, and that is to provide a practical, structural way to slow down, challenge our automatic thinking, and make better choices. So, the next time that you find yourself reacting impulsively, which is going to be in like 20 minutes, most likely, ask yourself, is this system one talking? Am I about to make a decision based on an assumption or fear or some sort of bias? If the answer is yes, run the interface response system, the simplicity of it. And if you listen to my podcast, I kind of explained it in the first 10 episodes. That's the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. Run the interface response system, step into the space of conscious perception, system two, and then proceed in support of your greatest wants, needs, and desires. My thoughts are that we hack the system before the system hacks us. Make sense? Love and appreciate you all. Thank you so much for all your comments. Look at this last one. It's all based in the past, our conditioning. We can't, let me just put it up here. So we can't pretend to not be conditioned. Beliefs are chains and biases. There's a nice is noticing what you believe, then asking what you want to believe. Beautifully said, Monica, as always. So love and appreciate you all. Remember, if you learned something today, give it away. That's how it's going to stay. So have a nice day. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.